The three dragon lords ruling over Cathay have a lot in common, being dragons for one, loving a good compass and getting down with all that harmony. But what I want to know is, who's the best? Well, let's find out and rank every Grand Cathay faction from worst to best. But real quick, if you want to know the best way to avoid the worst interruptions to these videos, then become a channel member for just $1 a month. All the same videos, but none of the ads. Coming in third place, we have Zhao Ming. Zhao's faction effects are spread across quite a range of focuses. Bonus caravan capacity and activity is good if you can get them built up early, otherwise it's just allowing you to toss more gold down the drain when they inevitably die. Bonus attack and reduced upkeep for Ogre Mercs is pretty strong, especially considering his close proximity, however it means there's not much left for his own troops. All they get is a little extra armor, and honestly I feel like armor is one of the worst stats to get a boost to beyond the first few turns, since armor piercing will completely negate it later on. Lastly, extra recruit rank for alchemists. Cool I guess, but hardly a game changer. His starting location on the southern border of Cathay isn't as bad as it seems. He for sure has a lot of potential threats on his doorstep, but he can actually negate most of them by just being friends. Balth and the Ogres will be more than happy to be pals, leaving the only real threat the starting war, Snitch and eventually Hellman once he crawls his way north. If you leave the rest of Cathay to Yao Ming, you can carve out quite a chunk of territory for yourself in the south, all without the responsibility of managing the bastion. On the battle side of things, his army effects might as well not exist. Reduced upkeep for melee units is technically good I guess, magic item drop chance is also an effect he has, no unit buffs, no focuses to help him stand out, kind of a major letdown I won't lie. As for his combat prowess in human form, he has access to a mix of the laws of metal and yang, giving him tons of damage and utility centered around armor. He's a strong battler but doesn't have a lot of armor piercing damage, and lastly has some decent buffs for allied damage and defense, making him a strong support lord. When he's in dragon form he loses all spells but some non-armor piercing area damage, so still has great damage outside of melee. Speaking of which, he gains very powerful armor piercing and area attacks, making him a very powerful monster, albeit with a giant hitbox. His unique skill line is actually two. Master of Metal obviously upgrades his metal magic alongside more Ogre and Alchemist buffs. Master of Alchemy instead allows him to buff the damage output of allies in a huge radius and choose whether to make that hot, armor piercing or poisonous. Not bad, but again, nothing that gives him a clear focus outside of Ogres. Despite his apparent lack of responsibility for defending the Great Bastion, Zhao still ends up being the forgotten child of the Dragon Litter. He doesn't really have anything that bad, he just happens to also not have anything that good. If I was to nail down his main focus, I would say it's Ogre Mercenaries, and allow me to point out the obvious problem with that: they're not part of the faction. If he had some skills and effects for them alongside some of his own units, I wouldn't mind, but it's basically the Ogre show. There's no way to guarantee getting them in your army, so there's a good chance that you won't be able to use them at all. As I said, armor buffs feel basically pointless once armor piercing comes online, so he doesn't bring a lot of value to the faction. Even caravans are pretty forgettable since that mechanic is kinda terrible outside of the Chaos Dwarves. I don't think Zhao is actually that bad, but he feels like playing as a minor faction, as he doesn't really bring anything worthwhile or unique. In second place we have Miao Ying. As the defender of the Great Bastion, her faction effects are mostly about defending Cathay from chaos. The best parts of this are more ammo for all units, which rocks in a faction with as much firepower as this, and bonus leadership when battling versus chaos, and 10 leadership can actually make a major difference. The reduced corruption is nice and the cheaper bastion buildings is okay to build them up for less gold. However, the defensive supplies are pretty nothing since 300 is barely enough to build a single thing. All in all, they're very mixed and not all that useful all of the time. Her starting location in the north of Cathay is actually pretty strong. The starting war against another Cathayan faction is fairly straightforward to win and nets you a couple of provinces right out the gate. After that she has rats to the south, dark elves and lizards to the east, and inhospitable chaos to the north. She also has no shortage of allies nearby, with multiple minor factions willing to confederate very early on, especially once chaos starts attacking the bastion. Her army effects bring more bonuses for missile units focusing on gunpowder. Reduced upkeep for all and increased missile strength and recruit rank for all gunpowder is pretty damn strong and encourages a very ranged heavy focus. In battle, obviously, she has two forms, and in human form she has a mix of laws of life and yin, and she mostly gets the hits from both, making her into a very powerful caster. In combat she's not bad with great melee stats, non-armor piercing damage and decent survivability. She can also empower nearby allies with abilities, making her a great support lord, but not amazing as far as combat is concerned. In dragon form, she drops most of her spells, keeping only the most expensive and devastating. However, she gains a lot more armor piercing damage while still retaining her very strong melee stats. This, combined with her area attacks, makes her an extremely powerful battler, with the one downside being the giant hitbox. Her unique skill line has a decent mix of buffs to herself, allies, and the rest of the campaign. In particular, the further reductions to the cost of the Great Bastion allow her to build it up for practically nothing, giving her a very strong defensive border. That, along with more buffs to ranged units and empowering her magic and dragon form, make this line well worth investing in and pretty damn strong. Even with her responsibility of manning the Great Bastion and holding back chaos, Meow really brings the heat. Once you gain control of each of the gates and start building them up for cheap, you basically don't have to worry about the north again. Village is the only major threat up there, so one excursion to take him out, and there's not really much to worry about. She can then turn her attention to the massive amount of Cathayan lands she can easily bring under her control, either by conquest or confederation. And all of this is made ever more possible through her buffing of gunpowder units, making some of the most powerful ranged units in the roster that much better. She honestly beats Zhao because she actually has mechanics and direction. He can technically build what he wants and barely receive any benefit. She may be limited by gunpowder focus, but if you follow it, you'll get a ton of added value. And in first place, of course, it's Yuan Bo. Funnily enough, his major campaign effects don't even get a mention on his Lord Select screen. His main mechanic, Matters of State, allows him to empower settlements and armies with all kinds of wacky and powerful effects, and he can unlock 4 new and vastly superior compass directions by capturing key settlements and performing rituals. Alongside this, he gains vision of all factions he's trading with, which is excellent for both opening up vision of the map for more potential diplomacy, and for getting intel about what's going on out there. Bonus relations with Cathay and Astromancer capacity are fine, and faster research per province capital seems boring, but can allow you to speed through the tech tree in moments if you really get it stacking. He also has a dual starting location, with him being over in Lustria, but retaining a foothold in Cathay. He can choose to get rid of this once he secures his starting province, and I don't really see why you wouldn't, unless you just enjoy pain and having no gold. Over in Lustria, it's a whole mess of different factions with greenskins, lizards, demons, and much more. If you want those new compass directions, you're gonna have to travel the entire continent, so be prepared to take on everyone. If you choose to retain Cathay, then you start just next door to Zhao Ming, and enemy-wise, you're looking at plenty of vampires with rats to the north, and dark elves and lizards to the east. As for army effects, well, he basically doesn't have any. Upkeep reductions for some monstrous units that came with his DLC are cool and all, but we know gold has no meaning when you get late enough into the game. Extra magic reserve is pretty good, but can be achieved by simply having a caster or two in your army and leveling them up a bunch. I kind of wish there was something to get mad at here, because as it is, there's just nothing. In battle, his human form is the best battler by far. He has a mix of the laws of heaven, light, yin and yang, making him a very versatile and powerful spellcaster. His combat ability is also extremely strong with great melee stats and huge arm-piercing anti-infantry damage. This makes him good against other footlords and heroes, especially with that execute. His abilities are mostly selfish to empower himself, with only a little left for allies. In dragon form, he retains just the Comet of Cassandra, so has some powerful explosive spell power. His melee power increases but shifts away from single target dueling to area damage. He can still do great to lords and heroes, but it'll be a little bit harder to focus that damage on one unit. He still has execute in dragon form, so even if he can't burst them down as fast, he can still finish them in moments. Could it really have been anyone else in first place? The other 2 Cathay lords dropped with Warhammer 3 release, so of course they were going to be lacking just as the game was. Plus, they were part of one of the worst DLCs in the history of the series, so the faction reworks were hardly ever going to be that good. Anyway, Yuan may still share a lot of the same mid-as-hell base mechanics as the other 2, but he also brings a lot more outside of that, making him a whole lot better. The Matters of State give him lots of buffs over the course of the entire campaign that only get better the more you invest in them. The new compass directions are some of the best options you have, so are a major win even if they are a pain to get going. And who can ignore just how crazy strong the dude is himself? The execute is absolutely insane, and I pray it never gets nerfed, because that's honestly 75% of the fun of battling with him. The strongest lord and the strongest faction in Grand Cathay, and if you ask me, that makes him the obvious pick for number 1. But what I want to ask you is, who's your favourite of the 3 Cathayan lords? Let me know in the comments below, like, subscribe, and if you want more Warhammer 3 rankings, then check out this video all about the dwarf legendary lords.